Okay, so this video is gonna be about postmodernism. A little bit more about that. Because there's a few things that I would like to go over about postmodernism that I didn't go over in the last video. And I guess basically it's creating a little bit of a background for anybody who's not as familiar with it or wants to know why I'm thinking what I'm thinking and so forth. So, um, okay, so postmodernism in general, what is it? It's basically the belief or the ideology that there is no absolute truth or ultimately objective reality. Um, it doesn't go to an extreme to say nothing is real, but it goes enough to say, look, there is no greater culture than another. Cultures are relative, belief systems are relative. Everything's very subjective. So in other words, it's saying everything is really complex and we can't just box it into nifty little paradigms and so forth. Um, and that's basically it. Basically emerged during the last century because of a few things that happened. Not a few things, many things that happened. Very complex motivations for postmodernism. Um, to name a few, the theory of relativity, which was thrown, which basically didn't disprove Newton, but it said, look, Newton did not have the whole picture here, and kind of shook us up about what was real and what the universe was like, because Newton and basically all similar thinkers to Newton during the Newtonian paradigm of science saw science, and not only in physics but in the social sciences, as causal. A causes B, B causes C, A causes B and C, that sort of thing. Um, that was sort of the dominant attitude of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. But after World War One, after the stock market crash, after World War Two, various thinkers in different fields, after some various breakthroughs, it really shook up the way we saw the world. It wasn't so causal. There are too many variables for just A to equal B. Now it was a whole variety of different things causing something else, and you had to look at things subjectively. You couldn't just say, well, in all cases A equals B or A causes B. Now you had to say, in this case A equals B, but in this case 1 equals C. It gets really complex. You have to take things almost by a case-by-case basis. And what a lot of the philosophical and sociological traditions started to do was break down the old paradigm and kind of critique it and see how it was too simplistic, it was oppressive, or it just missed the mark on a lot of things. It missed the complexity that was underneath everything. Um, so that's postmodernism in a nutshell, and some of its branches, I guess you could say, overall would be in philosophy, existentialism, which it gets really to the core of what postmodernism is about, somewhat. It is able to say, look, there is no ultimate reality. We don't know what's real. Not really. We don't have ultimate truth. Everything's relativistic. Life has no meaning. The meaning is what we give it. So these are the attitudes, and they were groundbreaking when they came out because they deepened our perspective of the world. They deepened our perspective of ourselves. So they held ground for a long time. Though interestingly, they didn't hold ground for as long as modernism did, because Newton. The Newtonian paradigm lasted a very long time. The postmodern paradigm, arguably, came to beginning and an end within the 20th century, and even though it still holds precedent and it still holds prevalence today, it's not as powerful or influential as it used to be. It's kind of been losing some ground in a lot of respects, and there are a few reasons for that. One is, as we begin to understand something, even from a scientific perspective, one scientific paradigm switches to another scientific paradigm because the one that we're currently in begins to lose credence. It begins to lose its values. We begin to say, no, this is not so true anymore. And there's an author who actually talks about paradigm shifts. He calls them scientific revolutions, the structures of them, how they work. What basically happens is that you have some paradigm, and you have the central stage of that paradigm in which you continue to do discoveries, you continue to scientifically explore the facets of it. But the more you explore your paradigm, your mode of thinking scientifically, the more anomalies begin to pop up. And to some account, it's seen as only on fault of the scientists for not understanding some measure of their procedure or miscalculating something, so there are minor adjustments. Science is always changing, we're always trying to figure out stuff better. But there comes a point where there are enough anomalies in scientific breakthroughs which completely revolutionize the dominant mode of thought to begin with. For instance, the Newtonian paradigm, it made sense, and we really intensified it over its life course since Newton, when we really began to understand all these great other aspects of mathematics and physics. But it reached a critical point where things began not to add up anymore, and these things kept building and building and building. And Einstein and the theory of relativity was the critical mass point, which kind of completely shifted the entire attitude of scientists. It completely revolutionized the scientific physical paradigm. And in the same sense, you can see this happening with modernism, which can be related to Newtonian physics and Newtonian paradigm, and postmodernism. Modernism just didn't add up anymore. There are a lot of things that were wrong or incorrect, and there was this explosion of new ways of thinking. And these new ways sort of said, whoa, okay, we have all this complexity and all these relativist stuff and existential, and maybe we're making up our own meaning, maybe it's not objective, and all this stuff started to happen. So that's basically what happened in the 20th century. This is sort of the history. But now here's the next part two, I guess you could say. We don't have postmodernism is reaching the stage that modernism reached. We're reaching another scientific revolution, and this is both in physics and also in social sciences and philosophy. Suddenly, it's not going to make as much sense to kind of just say, look, everything's relative, because the deeper we dig into the social sciences and the more research we do, the more anomalies there are, and the more inconsistencies there are with postmodernism. As we go along, our perspective grows, and as our perspective grows, we tend to see bigger structures that we originally had no idea about, and then they completely change our smaller mode of thinking, which you can say Newtonian physics was a smaller mode of thinking, and then all of a sudden relativity was the larger realm of thinking, and all of a sudden we had enough material and scientific information to kind of say something bigger is going on here. And I guess Newtonian physics works within this, but only relatively speaking. And in the same sense, postmodernism and its values, of relativism, of subjectivity, of the complexity of cultures and belief systems, all of that is very true. But as we continue to study social sciences and people and civilization in general over time, we begin to see general trends that are indicative of larger structures. So postmodernism itself is sort of losing ground as we enter into the 21st century, because we're beginning to see things that we didn't see before, and they're questioning and they're anomalous in reference to postmodernism and philosophy. So you could say postmodernism is a form of philosophy as well, arguably speaking. But in the social sciences, we're suddenly trying to create bigger pictures, and we're entering into an age where we think we can have bigger pictures, at least more so, not ultimate end of being pictures, but we can definitely have more inclusive and integral perspectives. And I guess this is where we are at right now.